The fire hose of news from America can feel like a lot these days.
If you're trying to figure out what to make of it all, we got you.
I'm Katie Simpson.
And I'm Paul Hunter. We're correspondents here in Washington,
working just around the corner from where much of the action is taking place.
2 blocks from the White House.
And that's the name of our new podcast.
For top-notch analysis of U.S. politics from a Canadian perspective, find 2 blocks from the White House every Wednesday wherever you get your podcasts.
Including YouTube.
You know that wellness goal you set at the start of the year? It's not too late to stick with it and make your future self proud. Especially with the all-in-one nutrition shake from Kachava. With 25 grams of protein, 6 grams of fiber, greens, adaptogens, and more. No fillers, no nonsense, just the highest quality ingredients. Stick with your wellness goals. Go to Kachava.com and use code NEWS for 15% off. That's KACHAVA.com, code NEWS.
Frequency Podcast Network. Stories that matter, podcasts that resonate.
Whether it's huddled around the TV in the living room, streaming from phones and laptops while at work, or even gathered by the hundreds in sports bars, town squares, and school gyms, Canadians have been glued to coverage of the 2026 Winter Olympics in Italy. And 2 weeks in, these Olympics have served up non-stop memorable moments. We cheered and high-fived when Canadian athletes won gold in freestyle skiing and speed skating. Our hearts swelled watching Piper and Paul's flawless final performance to take bronze. They broke watching our injured hockey goat Marie-Philippe Poulin tearfully accept silver after the women's team fell to arch rivals the U.S. in overtime. And they soared again when our men's team came from behind to win their semifinal against Finland and secure their spot in the gold medal game. But even though interest in the games has been high, Canada's medal count has not. Entering day 14 of the Milan-Cortina Games, Canada was ranked 11th in the Olympic standings with 15 medals, only 4 of them gold. A far cry from the 29 medals our athletes brought home from the Games in Pyeongchang just 8 years ago. So is Team Canada having a stroke of bad luck? Or is there something else going on? I'm Catherine Jette, and today on The Big Story, we're taking a closer look at Canada's performance at the Winter Olympics and the possible reasons our athletes aren't reaching the podium quite as often as they once did. I'm joined by Julie Stevens, a professor at Brock University in Sports Management and Organizational Change. She was also a special advisor for the Canada Games from 2018 to 2023. So, Julie, it seems like you are uniquely qualified to join us for this topic today. I'm really glad that you could be here.
Yes, thank you very much for inviting me, Catherine.
So, first of all, I want to make it clear, we're not criticizing Team Canada or our amazing athletes. We know they've sacrificed a ton and worked really hard to represent our country, and they've provided so many thrilling moments for us at these games. But people have been noticing the number of medals that we are winning or not winning. And what stands out to you so far about our athletes' performance in Milan?
I've noticed that they're giving their all. There seems to be a real heightened sense of pressure on them to perform well. And I think they compete with integrity and come very close. Like there's such a small margin to being on a podium versus not on a podium. And what strikes me the most is just the pride I have seeing them compete, how they carry themselves with their fellow competitors, and how they speak to all of us through their media interviews and exchanges.
Are you surprised at the number of times we have or have not landed on the podium so far at these games?
I've watched a lot of Olympics, and there's always been ebbs and flows. And you wouldn't necessarily say surprised, but it does seem there's a swing from Paris where we had, a record number of medals for non-boycotted games. It took a while for these games to break through with some medal results, but that doesn't really mean, of course, that the athletes weren't performing well. They all perform well. It's just very difficult to succeed.
How would you say the number of Canadian medals so far How do you say that compares to the expectations that these athletes had going into the games?
Right. We watch a tremendous amount of Olympics, but it's only 2 weeks every 4 years. So there's a lot of hype, there's a lot of excitement, and I think with that comes high expectations. And so because it's under the microscope right now, it's easy to raise the red flag that the national flag isn't being raised so much at these games. I think we need to just kind of balance our expectations around the reality of what our athletes face in a 4-year time cycle leading up to a games. There's a lot that they do before the games. They're in world competitions, they're on world circuits every other year. And so the excitement builds expectations. And at the same time, I think we need to just temper those expectations with an appreciation of what we're watching and the great competition we can enjoy.
But when we compare our results at these games, I mean, you mentioned in Paris, we're looking at, the number of medals we had, for example, in Korea, 29 in 2018, 26 in Vancouver, and that included 14 gold, our most ever. Right now, going into day 14 of the games, we had something like 15 medals. What do you say is behind that difference?
I would say we need to take a long-term view on how we've come to be at these 2026 games. Our sport system is just that, a very, very elaborate system that spans throughout the country with the goal of identifying young talent who want to compete, want to get into sport in the first place, and then climb up through a system that has competition opportunities and development opportunities for a pathway that leads to a national team and becoming an elite high-performance athlete, basically as your occupation, your career. And if we keep in mind this system is about 50 years old, it's continuously had an issue of kind of high times of funding and low times of funding. So overall, there has been a scarcity of funding into this system for many, many years. And I think part of what we're seeing is the under-resourced nature of this system is starting to show, despite the best effort of what the athletes can accomplish.
We are hearing some stories. There's been reporting suggesting that some of the athletes have to sleep on friends' couches while they're training, or, one even sold their old Lululemon kit from a previous games to try to raise money for their own trip to Italy. Is that the kind of thing you're alluding to, that these athletes are just not being financially supported?
I think it's a bit of that for sure. When I was an early graduate student, my advisor, Rob Beamish, and a colleague of his, Janet Borroway, published a book called What Do You Do for a Living? I'm an Athlete. And they talked about high-performance athletes. It was 1988, the Ben Johnson time with the Seoul Olympics, and how these athletes commit so much that they actually could be considered employees of the federal government because they were funded through Sport Canada. Athletes still are funded through the Athlete Assistance Program, kind of dispersed by Sport Canada. And, they're committing to a profession, to a career, working on behalf of the Canadian people, employed by the federal government. It was an interesting idea. And to your point, if they were considered employees, they should be paid at a livable wage and, treated as such to support what they strive to achieve.
Even for the ones that win medals, it seems like there are countries where the athletes are really richly rewarded for making it to the podium, and here in Canada, not so much.
It seems like in Canada, we kind of have this back and forth tension between we really strive to see these Olympic results and the podium and the medals. But at the same time, as Canadians, we kind of say, oh no, we do it for the love of the game, our passion for the sport. So it leaves this kind of, should we support with medal-winning funds, or is every member of the Canadian Olympic team that competes supported through our Athlete Assistance Program on an even basis? And in the end, regardless of how you approach this, there simply isn't enough funding there to maintain the kind of sports system that a lot of people hope to see when they're watching the Olympics, but also the kind of sports system we need to see in between the Olympics, the other 4 years.
You know that wellness goal you set at the start of the year? It's not too late to stick with it and make your future self proud, especially with the all-in-one nutrition shake from Kachava. With 25 grams of protein, 6 grams of fiber, greens, adaptogens, and more. No fillers, no nonsense, just the highest quality ingredients. Stick with your wellness goals. Go to kachava.com and use code NEWS for 15% off. That's KACHAVA.com, code NEWS.
So let's talk about the effect that this lack of funding has on our athletes. Obviously, from a performance standpoint, if they're missing out on certain resources and training and facilities that their competitors are going to have, but also from a morale standpoint.
Yeah, it's like anyone who works for an employer, or in this case, athletes are part of a national sport organization, their sport federation that organizes the national team, does selection, and that's essentially like recruitment for a high-performance athlete workforce, right? And you need to feel supported, and the national sport federations do a lot to encourage national teams, but you do see from time to time situations where the funding isn't adequate. You're told as an athlete, if you can find your own resources to get yourself to the games, you can compete at the games. You hear a lot about, the women's national soccer team that was funded differently than a men's national team. And this happens in other sports as well. So there's a lot of facets on the field of play, but also away from the field of play that are critical. And I think we do see some situations where athletes may not feel as supported as they need to be to succeed. And they come through on their own drive, their own passion, and the support system they have around there sometimes to overcome this, to get to an Olympics or even just compete on the world stage year by year.
One thing you mentioned was that even though we are just watching the Olympics for 2 weeks, it's a 4-year cycle that we're actually seeing play out. And I wonder if it even goes beyond that, if we need to be thinking of sports even from the youth level or the grassroots level. If you take example, Norway with like a fifth of the Canadian population and how they're number one in the medal standings, 34 as of day 14. And what I'm reading about the Norwegian approach is that they tried to make youth sports inexpensive for families and really fun for kids, like not even keeping score until the kids are in their teens, and just really taking part in sports a part of the national culture in a way that maybe we don't here. Is that also part of the issue?
I think that's a great observation. I always think that our sports system, which, like I said, for 50 years has become bureaucratic and very specialized and divided the roles across sports and levels of the system to actually become very fragmented and almost short-term in focus and funding, needs to be like Norway and get some kind of patience to how they allow the sports system to kind of flourish and evolve and attract participants and move them through a system, if they wish to, up to the top of the pyramid. But patience to build a system, and participation has always been on the radar when it comes to Canadian sport policy, but never really committed to because the system is so complex and difficult to coordinate.
Yeah, it seems like a real obstacle to me. I was at a skating rink with my kids. Everyone's wearing hockey skates, and there was one kid wearing speed skates. And I thought, boy, how did that child get introduced to that sport? I mean, it seems like many of these sports, say, skeleton or luge, for example, how would most children even know that they wanted to do that?
That's right. And you wouldn't know till you get a little older, right? And at the beginning, you just want to play, be active. And really, those kinds of introductions happen in schools. They happen through our recreation departments in our municipalities. And then you get into a little bit of community clubs where you can keep, at certain times, the price affordable. The problem is those stakeholders who run those kinds of opportunities aren't connected very well to the sports system from a competitive pathway for an elite athlete. So you get this kind of disjuncture of you get into sport if you want to become a high performance athlete or if you really want to compete, where the reason needs to be just to participate. And so you need to give youth time to figure out if it's speed skating, if it's luge, if it's something, really unique. And they may not know till they're in their teens and have been active all that time. But, the sports system has a tendency to really select and stream players, youth, early on in their participation pathway, which actually has two negative effects. One is it eliminates a lot of people who just get deselected or say the sports system's not for me, can't afford it. Or two, doesn't wait long enough to see athletes mature, grow, go through their growth spurts, learn a little bit more about themselves and what they enjoy doing, and then pick a sport later. So we have a lot of pathway issues that prevent the development of our base, like Norway has this broad base.
So are you seeing in different levels of government that there is more of an appetite to start funding our athletes a little bit better, start supporting them better? Or is the kind of slide on the podium that we've been seeing, do you expect that to continue?
I'm not sure about the appetite. The last budget by the federal government in 2025 did not include any new operational funding for national sport organizations. The Canadian Olympic Committee and the Canadian Paralympic Committee both requested about $144 million in extra funding to close the gap for all the sport federations at the national level that had, kind of built up over a couple of decades, and it didn't happen. And yet, you see the Prime Minister on a call congratulating a gold medal winner in Italy this year. And so we like to celebrate. However, the commitment to support doesn't seem to come. And it's appreciated that times are tough. So it's easy to say, maybe the new ways to look at funding or more efficiencies to work with other systems in our society that involve physical activity and sport to collaborate with this particular, development of high performance athletes is the way to go, because we need to better utilize the funding we do have at the moment.
Yeah, tell me more about what Canada gets as a whole when our athletes are properly supported and doing well on the world stage. What do we derive from that?
On one level, we have this kind of collective spirit and national unity. And it's one of the reasons the federal government got into high performance sport in the first place, was this national stature on the global stage. It helped with international relations. It built a sense of unity across the country because we had these shared collective moments that we're all watching, right? Perhaps that's the case yesterday with the women's hockey team and the gold medal. It's maybe the case for the men's hockey team and the gold medal match tomorrow. But ultimately, that is a little symbolic. I think the real concrete value, each one of us, if we were to say, what does sport give me and how does sport connect to me? It's to participate in physical activity and other kinds of recreational and competitive sport opportunities in my community. What can I do walking down the street to my recreation center? What does my child get to do in school, right? And are there affordable opportunities with sport clubs and associations where I can get involved, right? In an affordable way that fits my level of interest, my confidence can be built, and so on. So I think we need to get back to that, what does it really mean to me, approach to sport, because then it's proven to be a value And over time, then you get government leaders who set these budgets, recognizing Canadians believe sport's an important part of our social fabric, of our community building, of our economy, and of our national identity and sense of unity. And in the end, these athletes will get supported.
So maybe in the same way that inspiration to take part in sports comes from the top down, we see the Olympics, we get inspired to find out what's available near us. The funding kind of needs to come from the bottom up. We start with community programs, youth sports, and then we see what we can develop.
That's one way of looking at it, exactly so. But the sports system has been pressured by a federal government system that was driven towards excellence. You know, our sport policies of the past, going back 25 years or so, include participation as a goal, but emphasize when it comes to the funding and what sport leaders are accountable for to report back on what they achieved with that funding, focus on high performance excellence in sport results. And so to think about it, you're right. Like, we can see the same kinds of issues, say, in our healthcare system. The federal government funds quite a bit, but decisions are made by provinces, and then you get down into municipalities who might be more about public health delivery and so on, and in their communities. The sports system's the same way. The drive has to be from the bottom level up, yet the funding that comes into high performance sport is typically the federal or the national level down, and maybe just to national level sport organizations, not really down into provincial systems that can fan this, support out into communities and enable more participation. It's a real challenge, but your bottom up movement is really where I think sport can make a difference.
Well, Julie, thanks a lot for joining us on this. You've given us a lot to think about.
Thank you very much. I enjoyed the discussion.
And that was The Big Story. We'd love to hear your thoughts on this conversation. Send us an email at hello@thebigstorypodcast.ca. Reach us on Instagram at FrequencyPods or on Blue Sky at The Big Story. If you know someone that might enjoy this episode, be sure to send it to them. You can listen to The Big Story every day on the Seeker app or wherever you get your podcasts. I'm Catherine Jette. Thanks for listening.
You know that wellness goal you set at the start of the year? It's not too late to stick with it and make your future self proud, especially with the all-in-one nutrition shake from Catchava. With 25 grams of protein, 6 grams of fiber, greens, adaptogens, and more. No fillers, no nonsense, just the highest quality ingredients. Stick with your wellness goals. Go to Catchava.com and use code NEWS for 15% off. That's KACHAVA.com, code NEWS.